This Christmas, my daughter-in-law looked me right in the eye and said, "We're doing Christmas at my mom's. You can stay home." I didn't argue. I just smiled, wished them well, and booked a flight. When I posted my photos online, my phone nearly exploded. Everyone kept asking the same question. Who was the man sitting next to me? Before I tell you how it all happened, take a moment to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. This story might just change how you see family, love, and second chances. My name is Linda Dawson, and I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a small house in Colorado, the one my husband and I bought 40 years ago. The walls are lined with old photographs, and the smell of cinnamon always seems to linger, especially around the holidays. Christmas has always been my favorite time of year, mostly because it used to bring my family together. My husband, Paul, passed away 8 years ago. Since then, my son, Mark, and his wife, Hannah, have been my only close family. Every Christmas, I would go to their house, bring my pecan pie, wrap gifts for my grandkids, and help Hannah with the decorations. It wasn't perfect, but it made me feel like I still belonged somewhere. This year, though, something felt different from the very beginning. Hannah had been distant for months, and even Mark seemed to call less often. Still, I told myself families get busy, people grow, and I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made them feel guilty for living their lives. A week before Christmas, I called to ask what time I should come over. Hannah answered. Her voice was polite, but it had no warmth. "Linda, we're spending Christmas at my mom's this year," she said. "It'll be easier for everyone. You can stay home and relax." I felt my heart drop, but I forced a smile even though she couldn't see it. "Oh, I see. That sounds nice," I replied softly. She thanked me quickly and hung up before I could say anything else. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table in silence. The house was quiet, except for the clock ticking on the wall. I looked around at the decorations I had already put up. Garlands on the fireplace, stockings hung neatly, the tree twinkling in the corner. For years I had done it all for them, so that when they arrived, it would feel like home. Now it just felt empty. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and looked through old photo albums. There was Mark as a little boy opening his presents, Paul carving the turkey, Hannah smiling when she first joined the family. My eyes stung with tears, but I kept flipping through the pages, whispering to myself, "It's just one Christmas. It's fine." But deep down, it wasn't fine. It wasn't just about being alone. It was about being forgotten. The next morning, I got a short call from Mark. His voice was full of guilt. "Mom, I hope you're not upset. You know how Hannah's mom likes to host. It's just 1 year, okay?" I said what mothers always say. "Of course, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine." When I hung up, I looked out the window. Snow was falling gently, coating the world in white. The neighborhood kids were building snowmen, and I could hear their laughter through the glass. For a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own life. Everyone had somewhere to be, and I was just here. That night, I sat by the fireplace with my cat curled on my lap. The lights from the tree cast a warm glow across the room. I could almost hear Paul's voice teasing me. "You always take care of everyone else, Linda. When will you do something for yourself?" It was then that a quiet thought took root in my mind. Maybe this year didn't have to be about waiting for an invitation that would never come. Maybe I could give myself a different kind of Christmas, one filled with peace instead of pity. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maybe it's time to start living for me." What I didn't know then was that this small decision would lead to something extraordinary, a trip that would change not only my Christmas but the rest of my life. The days leading up to Christmas were quiet, too quiet. The house that once buzzed with laughter and the sound of wrapping paper tearing now felt like it was holding its breath. I tried to keep busy, baking cookies I knew no one would eat, and wrapping small gifts for the neighbors' kids, just to feel useful. But every time I passed the family photo on the mantle, me, Paul, and little Mark smiling under a tree 20 years ago, I felt a heavy ache in my chest. I had always believed that love and family went hand in hand, that no matter how life changed, those we raised would never forget us. But as I stood in my empty kitchen, the reality hit me. Love doesn't disappear, but sometimes people stop seeing it. That evening, I tried to distract myself with television, flipping through holiday movies full of families reuniting, parents being surprised by their children, and warm hugs by glowing fireplaces. I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't. It was as if the screen was mocking me, showing me everything I was missing. I whispered to myself, "You're not part of anyone's story this year." That hurt more than anything. The next day, Mark called again. "Mom, I just wanted to check on you. Are you okay?" His voice was gentle, but hurried, like he was squeezing me in between tasks. I smiled and said, "I'm fine, sweetheart. I've got my tree up and a good book to read." He seemed relieved. "That's good, Mom. We'll stop by after the holidays, I promise." Then I heard Hannah's voice in the background telling him to hurry up, and just like that, the call ended. I stood there holding my phone long after the line went silent. My heart felt both full and empty at the same time, full of love for my son, but empty because he didn't seem to know how to love me back anymore. Not the way he used to. Later that night, I went upstairs to put away a box of decorations I didn't feel like unpacking. On the top shelf, I found an old suitcase covered in dust. It was the one Paul and I used when we took our first and only trip to Europe. We'd saved for years for that vacation. Paris, Rome, Vienna. I ran my hand over the worn handle and smiled faintly, remembering the laughter, the little moments, the way Paul used to take my hand and say, "See, Linda, the world isn't as big as we think. You just have to be brave enough to step into it." That memory stayed with me all night. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went to bed with an idea buzzing in my mind, one that felt both terrifying and thrilling. The next morning, I made myself a pot of coffee and sat down with my laptop. I typed in Christmas trips for senior just to see what would come up. Dozens of photos appeared, bright lights, Christmas markets, smiling travelers wrapped in scarves. There was one trip in particular that caught my eye, a Christmas tour of Europe, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. It left in 3 days. My heart started racing. It was crazy, completely out of character, but something inside me whispered, "Do it." For the first time in years, I felt alive. I filled out the form, entered my card details, and clicked Book Now. My hands shook as I did it, but I couldn't stop smiling. I wasn't waiting for someone else to give me permission to be happy. I was finally giving that permission to myself. The next few days were a blur of excitement and nerves. I pulled the suitcase from the closet and began to pack. Scarves, sweaters, Paul's old travel journal, and the little gold locket he had given me on our 20th anniversary. I told no one about my plans, not even Mark. It wasn't out of spite, it was out of freedom. For once, I wanted to do something that was entirely mine. When the day came, I stood at the airport surrounded by families hugging, couples holding hands, children laughing as they waited to board. I felt a small pang in my heart, but it didn't last long. I reminded myself that this was my new beginning. On the plane, I found my seat next to a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes. He smiled warmly. "Headed home or heading out?" he asked. I smiled back and said, "Heading somewhere new?" He chuckled softly. Good answer. His name was David Monroe, and as the plane took off, we started talking about where we were from, the places we'd seen, and the people we'd loved. By the time the plane touched down, it felt like I was talking to someone I had known all my life. There was something comforting about him, steady, gentle, and honest. He told me he was a retired professor traveling alone after losing his wife a few years ago. I told him about Paul, about my son, and about the strange emptiness that had led me there. He listened, not with pity, but with understanding. That night, as we arrived at our hotel in Munich and snow began to fall, I realized something powerful. My daughter-in-law had told me to stay home because she thought I had nowhere else to go. But standing there under that winter sky, I finally understood. I had the whole world waiting for me, and I had just begun to find it. The first few days of the trip felt like stepping into another world. Everywhere I looked, there were sparkling lights, cheerful music, and smiling faces. I wasn't used to being surrounded by so much joy, but it slowly started to seep into me. Our tour group was small, around 20 people, mostly retirees like me who wanted to spend Christmas somewhere different. We visited cozy Christmas markets in Munich, strolled past old cathedrals in Salzburg, and shared stories over warm cups of mulled wine. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the forgotten one sitting at home. I was part of something again. David, the man who sat next to me on the flight, seemed to gravitate toward me everywhere we went. He was tall, with a calm presence that made everyone around him feel at ease. He had a dry sense of humor and a smile that creased the corners of his eyes. We talked about everything: our kids, our late spouses, our regrets, and even our fears. He told me about how he used to travel with his wife every winter and how quiet his house felt since she passed away. When I said I knew that kind of quiet too well, he looked at me with understanding instead of sympathy. That simple look meant more than any words. On the third night, our group had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the snow-covered streets of Vienna. There were twinkling lights hanging from every window, and the soft sound of a violin playing somewhere in the distance. As the waiter poured wine, David raised his glass toward me. "To second chances," he said. I smiled and lifted mine. "And to finding joy where you least expect it." After dinner, we walked back to the hotel slowly, taking our time through the chilly air. Snowflakes fell in gentle swirls around us, and for a while, I forgot everything that had hurt me. I forgot the loneliness of my empty house, the sting of Hannah's words, and the disappointment of being left behind. For the first time in years, I was living instead of waiting. The next morning, I woke early and decided to take a walk before breakfast. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled of roasted chestnuts and coffee. I found a bench near a frozen fountain and watched the city come to life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Mark. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. Hope you're doing okay. We're having dinner at Hannah's mom's tonight. The kids miss you." I read the message twice. My first instinct was to reply right away and say, "I'm fine, just at home resting." But then I looked up at the snowy rooftops, heard laughter from a nearby cafe, and thought, no, not this time. So instead, I took a picture of the city, square glowing in the early light, and sent it with the message, "Merry Christmas from Vienna. Having a wonderful time." Within seconds, the typing bubbles appeared, then stopped. I smiled to myself and put the phone away. Later that day, our group visited a Christmas market in Salzburg. The stalls were filled with handmade ornaments, candles, and warm pastries. I bought a little wooden angel to hang on my tree next year, a small reminder of the Christmas that changed everything. David found me at one of the stalls and held out 2 steaming mugs of cocoa. "You looked like you needed this," he said with a grin. We sat together on a bench, talking for hours while snow fell around us. When evening came, the group gathered in the town square to watch the Christmas choir perform. Candles flickered in every hand as people sang "Silent Night." David stood beside me, his hand brushing lightly against mine. For a moment, I felt something stir in my heart, something I hadn't felt since Paul died. It wasn't just affection. It was the quiet peace that comes from being truly seen. Later that night, back in the hotel, I scrolled through the photos I had taken. There was one of David and me standing by the Christmas tree, both of us laughing as someone from the tour tried to take our picture. Without overthinking, I posted it on my social media with a short caption. Sometimes, the best company is found when you stop waiting for an invitation. I didn't expect much, but within minutes, the notifications started flooding in. Likes, comments, messages. Friends and old coworkers wrote things like, "You look so happy, Linda," and "Good for you, you deserve this." Then came the messages from my family. Mark texted, "Mom, where are you? Who's that man?" Followed quickly by, "Please call me." Even Hannah messaged, "Wow, I didn't realize you were traveling. You look different. Is that someone special?" I stared at their messages for a long time, then turned off my phone and looked out the window at the city lights below. For years, I had waited for my family to make me feel like I mattered. But right then, I realized I didn't need anyone's approval to live my life. I had given so much of myself to everyone else, and now it was my turn to take something back, my happiness. That night, I fell asleep with a calm heart. I didn't know what would happen when I went home, But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't the same woman who had been told to stay home. I had found something far more powerful than pity or apology. I had found my courage again, and that courage would change everything that came next. Christmas morning in Salzburg began with the sound of church bells echoing through the crisp air. Sunlight spilled through the curtains of my hotel room, glimmering against the snow outside. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding a small cup of coffee, feeling a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. My heart wasn't heavy anymore. It felt light, free, and open. I looked at my phone resting on the nightstand. There were over 50 notifications. Messages, calls, and comments on my photo from the night before. My simple picture with David under the Christmas lights had turned into something unexpected. I picked it up and scrolled through the messages. Friends from home sent kind words, telling me how happy I looked. Old neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years left hearts and warm wishes. But it was the messages from Mark that caught my attention the most. The first one read, "Mom, are you really in Europe? Who is that man?" The next one came a few minutes later. "You didn't tell us you were going anywhere. We're worried about you." Then came a third. "Please call me. Hannah won't stop asking questions." I sighed softly and set the phone down. It wasn't anger I felt, just a quiet understanding that sometimes people only realize your worth when they see someone else value it too. That morning, our tour group gathered in the hotel lobby to exchange small gifts. Everyone had bought something from the markets, a scarf, a trinket, a little box of chocolates. David handed me a small wrapped package. "Merry Christmas, Linda," he said with a smile. I opened it carefully. Inside was a delicate snow globe with a tiny wooden house and two figures sitting beside a Christmas tree inside. I looked up at him, touched. "It reminded me of you," he said, "someone who carries warmth wherever she goes." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, David. Thank you." We spent the rest of the day wandering through the city, visiting the Grand Cathedral, and walking along the river. The streets were lined with families, couples, and travelers, all celebrating in their own way. But I didn't feel alone anymore. As the sun began to set, David and I stopped by a cafe for dinner. It was quiet and cozy, with candles flickering on each table and carols playing softly in the background. We shared a meal, laughing about how neither of us could pronounce half the dishes on the menu. At one point, David leaned back in his chair and looked at me with that kind, thoughtful expression he always wore. "Can I tell you something, Linda?" he asked. "Of course." He hesitated for a moment. "I knew who you were before this trip." I blinked in surprise. "You did?" He nodded. "Your husband, Paul, used to be close friends with my brother, Stephen. They met during their Navy days. I met you once, decades ago at Stephen's house. You probably don't remember. I was just visiting for a few days. But Paul talked about you often after that. He said you were the kindest woman he'd ever known." My breath caught in my throat. "You're Stephen's brother?" He smiled gently. "Yes. I recognized your name when I saw the tour list. I wasn't sure if it was really you at first. But when I saw you at the airport, I knew. I didn't want to overwhelm you, so I waited until it felt right to tell you." I sat there speechless, my heart swelling with emotion. It felt as if life had come full circle, as if Paul, in his own way, had sent David to find me when I needed it most. David reached across the table and took my hand. "I think he'd be happy you're finally doing something for yourself. You gave your whole life to everyone else. It's your turn to be loved again, Linda." Tears slid down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were the kind that come when your heart is finally full. "Thank you, David," I whispered, "for everything." Later that night, back at the hotel, I finally called Mark. The moment he picked up, his voice was rushed and full of questions. "Mom, where are you? Who's that man? Are you okay?" I smiled softly. "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. I'm in Austria. That man is a friend, and I'm having the best Christmas I've had in years." He paused. "Why didn't you tell us you were going?" "Because you told me to stay home," I said gently. "So I did the next best thing. I found a home somewhere else, one filled with warmth and kindness." There was a long silence on the other end. Then quietly, he said, "I'm sorry, Mom. We should have never left you out." "I know, Mark," I replied, my tone calm but firm. But sometimes, life teaches us through distance. You can't appreciate someone's love if you keep taking it for granted. He sighed. Hannah feels awful. She didn't mean to hurt you. I know she didn't. But it's not about meaning. It's about remembering who we love and how we treat them. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't angry or bitter. I was proud. Proud that I had chosen myself for once. Proud that I had stepped out of my loneliness and found life again. The next morning, before we left for our final stop in Switzerland, I walked out onto my hotel balcony. The mountains rose in the distance, capped with snow that sparkled under the sunlight. I thought about everything that had happened. The rejection, the trip, meeting David, and finding peace again. My daughter-in-law had told me I could stay home, and in a way, I had. I had just found a new version of home, one inside my own home, and that was something no one could ever take away. That Christmas didn't just give me a new story to tell, it gave me my life back. When I returned home after the trip, the first thing I noticed was how different everything felt. The same house that had once seemed so lonely now felt warm and alive. Maybe it wasn't the house that had changed. Maybe it was me. I set my suitcase by the door, took a deep breath, and looked around at the decorations I had left behind. The tree still stood in the corner, the lights dim but steady, as if waiting for me to come home. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten guest in my own life. I felt like the host of something new, peace, independence, and quiet joy. On the kitchen table sat a small stack of envelopes, Christmas cards from neighbors, friends, and a few from people I hadn't heard from in years. There was even one from Hannah and Mark. The handwriting was careful and neat, and when I opened it, a small photo slipped out. It was of my grandchildren in matching pajamas, smiling beside a Christmas tree. Inside the card, the message was simple. "We missed you, Mom. We're sorry. Come over soon. We want to hear everything." I smiled, my eyes stinging a little. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was a start, and that was enough. Over the next few days, I unpacked slowly, putting small reminders of my trip around the house. The snow globe David had given me, a handmade angel ornament from Salzburg, a postcard from the cafe where we had laughed until midnight. Every item carried a story, and together they turned my once quiet home into something that felt alive again. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was soft, almost shy. "Mom, can we come over this weekend? The kids want to see you." "Of course," I said with a smile. "I'll make my pecan pie." That Saturday, the house was filled with noise again. Children running, laughter bouncing off the walls, the smell of cinnamon and sugar in the air. Hannah helped me set the table, and though she seemed nervous at first, I could see the guilt and sincerity in her eyes. As we ate, she finally spoke. "Linda, I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have excluded you. I thought I was making things easier, but I see now how selfish that was. You've done so much for this family, and we treated you like you didn't matter. I'm truly sorry." I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Hannah, we all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. Family isn't about perfection, it's about forgiveness." Mark nodded. "I don't think I've ever seen you this happy, Mom. You seem different." I laughed lightly. "That's because I stopped waiting for life to happen to me. I decided to live it." After dinner, we sat by the fireplace while I showed them pictures from my trip. The kids were fascinated by the castles and Christmas markets, and Hannah smiled as I described the people I met. When I showed them the photo of David and me under the Christmas lights, Mark grinned. "So, who's this mystery man everyone online keeps asking about?" I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "Just a friend," I said with a playful smile. "A very kind friend." Hannah leaned in. "He seems special." I looked at the picture again, the warmth in David's eyes shining back at me, and said softly, "He is." Over the next few months, David and I stayed in touch. We called often, shared photos, and planned another trip together for spring. He was a gentle reminder that life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Every time I spoke to him, I felt the same peace I'd found in those snowy European streets. But more than anything, I found something even deeper. I rediscovered myself. I realized that being left out wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. The pain of rejection had pushed me toward something far greater than comfort. It pushed me toward freedom. That following Christmas, a year later, the entire family gathered at my house. The table was full, the lights sparkled brighter, and laughter filled every corner. Hannah's mother even joined us, and to my surprise, she was as kind and warm as anyone could be. When everyone raised their glasses for a toast, Mark looked at me and said, "To Mom, for showing us that happiness isn't something you wait for, it's something you choose." As I looked around at my family, the people who once forgot me and the people who had found me again, I felt a deep calm. My heart was full, not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned that love, in its truest form, doesn't fade. It just changes shape and waits for you to notice it again. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. I thought about how far I had come, from the woman who quietly accepted being left behind to the one who took flight without hesitation. That trip hadn't just changed my Christmas, it had changed me. I realized that sometimes life takes things away so it can make room for something new. Sometimes the people who forget your worth need time to see what you already knew all along, that you were enough from the very beginning. I turned off the lights, smiling as the soft glow from the Christmas tree filled the room. I whispered to myself, this year, I didn't just celebrate Christmas, I celebrated myself. Then I picked up my phone and typed a simple post to share with everyone who had followed my story. When life tells you to stay home, go find your own adventure. You might just find yourself along the way. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more true stories like this one, and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far kindness and courage can travel.